Welcome to the Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies, where there's always another secret.
Welcome back, Sixers, to the Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies. This is episode 135. Today is May 8th, 2023. I'm Bill, and I'm joined, as always, by my Odyssean co-hosts, Amy and Jordan. Welcome.
Yar.
Yar indeed.
Yar indeed. I wasn't thinking so much of a yar, but all right, let's go with it.
Look, she took us in the pirate direction. I follow.
It's what my brain went there. Odysseus sailing.
I mean, I'm not against going the pirate direction. I'm all for buccaneers and pirates and Captain Hook is my favorite villain of all time, for crying out loud. But that said, before we get started, we do want to remind our listeners that the Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies is not a spoiler-free podcast. That means that if there is something in the Cosmere that you haven't read and you're worried about hearing spoilers, you might want to go read those first, then come back and join the discussion. Tonight, we are heading back to Roshar to discuss one of Wit's stories. Specifically, we're going to be talking about Wandersail, hence the nautical references. And we probably will talk a little bit about some of the events surrounding its telling as well. For our listeners who listen to the recordings or watch the videos on YouTube after the fact, we do want to remind you it's possible for listeners to interact with us live via chat as we record each episode at www.twitch.tv/innkeeperstable. We record episodes every other Monday night, starting at 7:30 p.m. Pacific Time, 10:30 p.m. Eastern, so please join us and take an active part in the discussion.
That's what the cool people do.
It is what the cool people do. You know what else the cool people do, Jordan? They become patrons.
It's true.
Because the Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies is made possible by the support of our listeners and patrons. The show will, of course, continue to be free, but if you want to help us out, you can head over to patreon.com/Cosmere Studies. Even pledging a couple dollars per episode will really help us out as we continue to work to improve the show. Patrons get immediate access to our Discord channel where you can talk about the show and the Cosmere with other listeners. We got a great community over there, lots of cool people. You also get early access to bonus episodes, exclusive access to other bonus content, and other good stuff. This week, we want to give a specific thanks to Scimitar, who just joined today, and Joshua V, who just upped his pledge. So thank you all very much. We really appreciate it.
And Scimitar, already a cool person because they're in chat.
Yeah, they are in chat. And y'all should join in chat as well because, I mean, you can interact, like I said. I already gave the spiel. We don't need to do it again. But all that said, guess what time it is, guys?
It's
time for the
Cosmere Thing of the Week.
Jordan, do you have the Cosmere Thing of the Week ready to pull up?
I do indeed.
All right.
I could just guide everyone's eyes to the bottom left of their screens here. We have some of the most involved Lego set stuff I have ever seen.
Yeah, so this is a fan-made Cosmere Lego design, or a bunch. There's a few of them that they posted on Reddit. And I blanked on the user's name. I'm sorry.
Math Magician 23.
Thank you.
Math is spelled with an E though, so maybe it's Math E Magician. Or Magician.
No. Instead of mathematician, it's mathemagician.
Oh, I see what's going. Makes more sense that way.
So
all I know is their Luthadel one. I don't know how they created the spires.
That's arrows.
Yeah, but
those are little arrows, I think.
Yeah, but it's incredible what they do with just little things.
I know, it's so cool. It's awesome.
No, some of them. There's for some reason a hot dog inside Wax's manor.
Because Wayne,
Wayne does like sneak food and such, and yeah, or maybe
all the hats on the side there on the left,
or maybe it's something that Malik has baked, the hot dog bun.
But yeah, no, but then they have just Things from like Edge Dancer, Elemancer Jack.
Yeah,
Oh, that is Lift. Okay, that makes sense.
it's just
Yeah.
it's such a really cool design. Definitely worth checking out. There's a
I love
link to all of
The
these
Emperor's
in
Soul's
the.
in a nice cramped space.
Of course,
Mhm.
she's in jail.
Yep.
But there's a link to all of these in the show notes. So if you want to check them out, definitely go over and click on those.
Yeah. For those of you who are audio only, there's one they have one called Singer Changing Forms. It's clear they just took a Darth Maul head from a Star Wars set for the singer, and I love it.
It works. Yeah.
It works perfectly. I've always actually kind of pictured the singers as looking somewhat Darth Maul-esque. What
Dathomirian?
Dathomirian, yeah.
I guess, yeah.
But
Oh, is that what they're called? I had no
Yeah, they're
clue.
from. You need to watch
Dathomir
the
is
animated series.
yeah,
That's what
from
your problem is.
the Clone Wars
Yes.
and Rebels.
Mhm.
Before we move on, though, let's take another step back because we also just got a new patron. Thank you, Libralita, for
Wow.
becoming a patron.
Oh, has anyone ever subscribed live while we're recording?
I don't know,
Thank you.
but yeah. So thank you very much again. Y'all are awesome.
Very much so.
Yeah. So let's move on to Sanderson news. First thing, I think this is really, really cool. If you are one of the graduating people from the university or Utah Valley University this past weekend, Brandon Sanderson was your commencement speaker. There is no official video up, but I know that on YouTube at least one person recorded the entirety of the speech. It's about 20 minutes long, so worth going to check out. I've only watched part of it, but I mean, it's your standard Brandon orating fare, but which
So
means
pretty dour.
depressing, completely depressing.
I think I need to confirm this, but I think the ASL person was Steve, who we've had on.
Oh,
The
really?
ASL
Really?
intern. I think it was
like,
him.
Like read and find out, Steve.
Yeah, I think it was him.
I didn't see him, but that's just because I didn't.
Because I remember
Steve did that and didn't tell us.
Because I'm in another group with him in another Discord thing, and I'm pretty sure he said, "Hey, I did that." So, but I need to double check that, and my phone is booting up again. But I will double check that fact. But I'm
Steve
pretty
and
sure it was
find
him.
out. Dadgummit. I'm pretty sure his last name is and find out, right?
Obviously.
That's how it works.
Other Sanderson news, though. Stormlight, again, this is a week old, just because that's when the news comes out. Stormlight 5 is at 42%. Skyward Legacy is at 17%. So those are making good progress. I'm really hoping that we can do another Brandon watch at the end of the year as we as Brandon sort of finishes up his major push to finish.
Brandon watch was pretty fun last time.
It was so much fun.
We need 2023.
Because he was live tweeting his progress, and so it was just great. Let's see.
So I did confirm it is Steve. He posted on the thing saying that he was doing the interpreting. So
that's awesome.
And he said nothing.
Not to us.
I guess we didn't clarify. So Libralita in chat asks, "What is Brandon watch?" So when Brandon was finishing up, was it Stormlight 4 or was it?
Oh shoot, I don't know.
Mistborn.
I thought it was Lost Metal.
Okay, it was when Brandon was finishing up one of his books. He was live tweeting as he did it, saying, "Okay, I'm getting this close. I'm getting this close," and because he did like one major push the last day.
Try and finish it, yeah.
And it just happened to be while we were recording our episode, so it lined up perfectly. And so every so often we check in and see, okay, what's the story on Brandon Watch this year? So that's what we were talking about. So the White Sand graphic novel, the omnibus is out. It was they did an Indiegogo like a year ago, and they have an omnibus, really nice quality deluxe edition of it. And unfortunately, it's been having a few issues with like flaking of the glitter stuff that's on
the foil
on
and stuff.
binding. Yeah. So Brandon, it was just letting people know that the publisher has actually agreed that people can send in their copies and get it replaced. There have been a lot of publishing issues with this book, unfortunately, but I have my copy now and it looks great. I'm really excited to have it.
Yeah, mine didn't
no
have any
issues.
issues, but I didn't get the box one. I got the one step below
Yeah,
that.
I got the slipcase one. I do want to get the version that you got too, Amy, though. I have the deluxe omnibus version next to my leather bounds and my Tress Deluxe and stuff. So. And then let's see, the May Mistborn, the May Year of Sanderson box is here. I got my copy a few days ago. Oh my gosh, there are some cool pieces in this one. Like there have been a couple that have been like, okay, these are all right. This is a good box.
I'm so jealous. I'm gonna just
Because
have to buy it once it's available for everybody again.
and I'm not going to spoil what's in it for the people who want to wait and listen to, there are definitely people who've got unboxing videos already up on YouTube, so definitely check those out. I don't want to spoil it here just because there are people who come here for reasons other than that, so I don't want to focus on it. This is definitely, I agree. Libralita in chat just said this was the best box so far. I agree. It's the best box so far. So yeah. Teen Author Bootcamp is an organization that Brandon has been working with, and he just sort of wanted to give them a shout out as they're kind of working to build back after shutting
COVID.
down for a few years because of COVID. So we're happy to boost that signal here as well. Brandon's worked with them for years. His niece has apparently attended before and loved it. So. And then lastly, Brandon did a 5 favorites with Shannon Hale, who's another author that's been posted. I haven't watched this. I'm not super familiar with it. I know that he previously did a 5 favorites with Will Friedle at FanX a few years ago.
So I did watch the one with Shannon Hale.
Okay.
Do you want me to?
What was the 5 favorites?
They talked about food. I don't remember what the different restaurants were, but it was different restaurants in Utah, and usually kind of like some of them were more iconic. Some of them were just like ones that they liked. He gave some recommendations for like a Korean place he really likes, and they just like were discussing
Chinese food.
And they were talking about like, what is the sauce? The fry sauce, and like how that's just like a Utah institution, which I grew up with it just being like what my brother would put on his seafood because it's like mayo and ketchup mixed together, and that's
we
like
called it.
I don't even remember what
island dressing.
Yeah, like I don't even remember what my family called it, but my brother would always do that whenever we had seafood. It's like he would dip his stuff in that. So like it's weird. I mean, I like it, but it's just such a big Utah thing. Anyway, but they talked about that and it was really fun. But she's done a lot of different books. Like when he asked her what genre she does, she's like, well, I've done like all this because she's done like picture books. She's done like, I think she's done adult fiction. I'm not sure, but then she's done like YA. She's done like a step up from picture books. She's done kind of all the different things. So she's
probably
she's
best
got a lot
known
of
for YA from what I've seen.
Yeah, but she's got a lot of good stuff out there. So
yeah, no, I've read a few of her things. She's excellent.
Yeah, they talked about food.
Awesome.
So yep.
So definitely check that.
There
out.
are worse topics.
yeah, there are.
I love food. I mean, Jordan knows how much I love food. I just got a smoker today, so I'm excited too.
I'm excited too.
You'll have to ask Josh because he finally used ours, so you can ask him for tips. Not that we've used it very much, but
I've been building up all sorts of tips and stuff. So
okay,
I'm ready to dive in at this point. Oh, okay. Well, should we move on to our main discussion?
Let's go sailing.
Come sail away. Come sail away. Come sail away with me, lad.
Come sail away. Come sail away.
Okay, so I referred to y'all as my Odyssean co-host for obvious reasons, I feel. Because this story felt very much inspired by the Odyssey, maybe the Voyage of the Dawn Treader, these classic, ocean voyages where they set sail onto the unknown seas, come across a land that nobody's ever seen, and things are strange. The Gulliver's Travels, all of these old traveling stories, and this is kind of Brandon's spin on that because he likes to take his own spins on classic things.
Yeah,
it's fun to spin.
So let's just start off. Do we want to start off with kind of the frame of
the
like
framework?
where Kaladin is kind of wandering off. He sees a fire out
Yeah.
in the darkness, and he's just like, what's going on? Why is there a
Well-
fire out in the middle of the shattered plains?
even before it, because I think it actually is kind of important for the context of maybe why Hoid is telling the story.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Is he's finally kind of confronting the fact that he has these magical powers, and he actually confronts Syl about it, and it's like, are you the one doing this? And she's like, no, we're doing this. But
Well,
I
it's
mean,
at
yeah,
the it's at the end
wouldn't
that she
happen
finally
without
admits that
me.
she's like, at the end she's like, it's both of us. She's like, I'm the cause of
Yeah.
it, but without you it wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He,
and
he kind of accused her of, are you doing this to me?
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
He's a little
Well, and he thinks he's cursed,
Mhm.
and it's
Yeah.
all he's in a very Kaladin mood.
Yeah,
he watched people die again.
Yeah.
And he couldn't save people again. And so it's obviously depressing.
But then he sees this fire out in the middle of the shattered plains. He's like, okay, what moron is out here, doing this? And he goes and he sees
A very specific moron.
a very specific moron. He sees Wit, who he has never met before. He doesn't know him as
Yeah,
the
he's
king.
just like, oh,
He
it's
just
this
knows him
light
as-
eyes. I don't want to mess with
as
it.
some light eyes wearing black, and he's just like, who is this chump? And then he starts to walk away, and of course Wit speaks to him, and he's like, I worry that I'll forget how to play this flute.
Mm-hmm.
And Kaladin's just like, what?
Well, and like he's weirded out him, just a dude playing an instrument to begin with, because
yes,
that's something that's considered one of the feminine arts,
Now-
or however, I forget how they say it.
Now you think about it, though, it'd be because technically the feminine arts can all be done one-handed. He's playing a flute, which is absolutely a two-handed instrument,
But Kaladin does say that he's used to flutes being more like how we think of recorders.
which is still a two-handed instrument.
But if you wore a glove, you could do it.
You
Yeah.
could.
It'd be awkward, but you could do it. Compared to having the glove.
I've tried playing flute type instruments with gloves, and there's leaking and all sorts.
Well,
of,
maybe it just
you
has
don't-
less buttons. It may just have only 4
Mm.
holes to do. I don't know.
Anyway,
Leaking?
because
You're spitting into
change
it.
notes. The way you change notes is you cover a hole, and it changes the
Mhm.
length of the tube. But if you with a glove, gloves are more porous. There's not as good of a seal between your finger and the hole on the instrument,
Okay.
Oh, okay.
and so
See, I played.
air leaks out, and you get
I thought you meant
trill.
liquid.
that
But
you-
yeah.
no.
I play the clarinet. I played the clarinet. I've forgotten
Mhm.
pretty much all of it now. So my buttons were more firm.
Well, except the clarinet has the holes as well. So
Well, but you'd usually pull a tab that did it, that would close it.
for some of the notes.
Anyway, I don't know. It's been a long time. But yeah. Instruments. Hoid's very good with his.
Well, I mean, and Hoid is a performer. He's always
Yeah.
been a performer.
He's also cheating.
I love the conversation that Hoid and Wit, or not Hoid and Wit have, that Kaladin and Hoid
I
have.
wouldn't put it past him, though.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, technically he plays a duet with himself.
he does. Yeah.
He accompanies himself on a flute, which is an impressive feat. Actually, there was a video that people should check out I can't remember what it is, but there's a guy playing a saxophone into a concrete pipe, and it starts echoing back, and he basically does what Hoid does. He's playing
That's pretty cool.
an
I'll
echo
find that.
duet. It's really cool.
A comebaxophone, if you will.
Oh.
Wow. So that's the episode title. But I like the conversation because you could see, I love these one-on-one interactions with Hoid, because Hoid, while he is obtuse with his answers, he's also still very, very honest about who he is.
Mhm.
This was the biggest reveals of Hoid's backstory for
Mhm.
quite some time.
Yeah.
Actually, probably since because other than his conversation he has with Dalinar, where he talks about watching the world burn if it lets
Mhm.
him do
Was that
stuff.
Dalinar or was that Shallan?
I think it was Dalinar. He said that too. I can't remember. It all runs
You're talking
together.
about with tears, yes, but I would.
Yeah.
I think that is Shalon.
Was
I
it
feel like
Shalon?
that. I feel like that was Shalon, where
thought-
he's like, "Yeah, I'm
I think that was
comforting you,
part-
and I
think that was
want
part
to
of the
help."
garden.
Yeah, that he's
I
like,
think that
I
was part of their conversation at the garden.
Okay. But yeah.
well, text voicing
I-
Dalinar. I don't know. We'll have to double check that.
I think the burning was Dalinar, but I don't know. But the point is, until that conversation, like, those conversations, like Tress would be the next time we ever get something that in depth that gives us a lot of his background.
Well, this book, I mean, this is the biggest interaction, like the biggest part that Hoyt has played in any of the books at this point.
Oh, it was shocking to see how active he was.
It's the only book that he's actually a major player rather than just a brief cameo. And it's really very interesting because that's also, because we've seen Whit, we're like, we recognize this character, and then suddenly, oh, that's the guy, that we've been looking for.
So I found the quote, and it says, "And while I am your friend, please understand that our goals do not completely align. You must not trust yourself with me. If I have to watch this world crumble and burn to get what I need, I will do so. With tears, yes, but I will let it happen." And it was to Dalinar.
It was to Dalinar.
Okay.
So I was incorrect.
I think the one we're thinking about with Shalon might have been the one where he's like, "Don't trust people who say they can see the future." And
That
she's
might
like,
be.
and I think she was like, "But you say you can somewhat see the future. Don't trust people who can say they see the
In the
future."
future. Yeah.
But no, it's a really interesting interaction because, again, this is Hoid being very, very honest.
Which is a rare thing for him.
And dropping a lot of clues as well. He's like, I began life as a thought, as words on a page. I was once named after a stone. He's like, was it a pretty stone? It was beautiful, and it was made worthless by me wearing it. I'm just like, okay, there's all sorts of stuff here.
I want to know what that means.
Well, the stone is the topaz, which he went by the name Topaz.
Oh,
and
okay. I'd forgotten.
There are words of Brandon on this, but not a whole lot, but just little hints that have been dropped. And a lot of the things that people have gotten from it are from Dragonsteel, which I have not read, I have not been able to get a hold of, but yeah. So he was dropping, and which isn't full canon anymore because basically anything that isn't published isn't necessarily full canon.
Yeah.
Sort of like George Lucas had his tiers of canon for Star Wars, where you had the movies and then the expanded universe and all that stuff. Brandon has similar rules with it. But again, it's just Hoid saying who he is, knowing, but he also realizes it's kind of the guy in a room situation where, if somebody you're watching a movie and they come in and they see something that's technically a major spoiler, they don't but they may not know that it's a spoiler, and so it's not a spoiler to them. But if you say, hey, this is a spoiler, you may then actually be spoiling it. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, I think a classic example, Brandon, doing that is Vin's earring.
Mm-hmm.
If you reread Mistborn, literally, you don't hear Ruin's voice until it goes into her ear, but you have no clue that that's what you're supposed to be watching out for.
Mm-hmm.
So almost nobody notices because it doesn't seem like those two things are connected at all.
Mm-hmm. But what Hoid is doing here when he explains this to, when he tells all this to Kaladin, it's like he's telling him all this stuff, but Kaladin has absolutely no context, so he's not revealing anything to him necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's he's being very Hoid.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the most Hoid he's been.
Mm-hmm. And then Hoyt starts telling him about this trailman's flute. He says it's used to accompany, it's used while you're telling a story. And he's like, well, how can you play a flute and tell a story at the same time? It's to accompany someone else telling the story. And Hoyt's just like, it's not necessarily what you think. And Kaladin kind of gives him the, okay, so prove it.
Yeah.
Tell me a story. And Hoid goes into the Wandersail. Or just Wandersail.
Well, he says and then in italics it says Wandersail.
Mhm. So let's talk about Wandersail. So I'm trying to think. What's the character's name? Denethil?
Darethil.
Darethil.
Yeah.
I have it in front of me right here, so I can keep it referenced.
It sounds very Tolkien-esque. So
It does. It makes me think of like Denethor and stuff.
Denethor, yeah. Darethil.
It made me think of Elantris.
Really?
Shudareth.
I never made that sort of a connection. I don't know if that's an intentional one, but
I have no clue either.
It's an interesting one.
But yeah, it was just one of those, like, I don't know. You notice certain things. You're just like, okay, is that on purpose or not?
Like, is that because both of the names came from Brandon, or is that because both of the names came from in world the same place?
Yeah. And so it was just something I noticed. I was like, yeah,
because
interesting.
this is he sets it in and says this is like before memory of things, even though they're telling this story, but he's like, it's a really super old story.
To be fair, most people's memory doesn't go as far back as Hoid's.
Oh, yeah.
No. Not traditionally, no.
Because other than the shards, he's essentially the oldest person in the universe.
Yeah. I mean, the dragons might be older, but we don't know.
I mean, he's older than some of the shards.
Dragons are like...
Dragons are dragons.
At least one.
Dragons are beyond person. Dragons are dragons.
They're their own category.
They're cheating by being dragons.
Dragon.
But I think it's really interesting that Darethil decides that he wants to go west to where the Voidbringers came from, to the source of, and you know, we've since learned that they basically came from a portal in Shinovar, but he goes farther west than that. And again, and this is me making the comparison to the Voyage of the Dawn Treader. I find it interesting that in this one he's going west, because for some reason I always feel like a lot of these journeys they ventured east, and so it's just kind of a, and maybe that's just in my head, but he's basically going farther than anyone else has gone.
It's the classic, you know, explorers
sail off the edge of the world, see what's
there. Gonna go beat the elements, and I mean here it's a high storm, so that's a big element to.
Well, and they go into that in Dawnshard. You know, about you're sailing out into the middle of the ocean, and there is no defense from a high storm. Now, sailing west, it's not as big a deal because the high storms come from the east, and by the time they get that far west, they've died down a bit, but it's still pretty rough.
Yeah.
Like, you don't want to sail east in a high storm because then you're going through the supernatural high storm. Yeah, and at this point, it's just a big, strong storm.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't get that seafarer's desire to
the wanderlust.
Yeah, so like I'll go for, you know, joyrides here or there. I do not get the sea part is the one that gets me. It's so unpredictable.
Yeah, are you scared of the stuff underneath the water, or just the?
I don't know. Empty? I think it's more. I think it's just just the emptiness of it. Like when you're on a road, it's like you know, I drove all the way home to Texas over Christmas by myself, and you know there's a lot of nothing in between Provo and Dallas, but you're always on a road, and so there's just this implication that if you stay on this thing, eventually it takes you somewhere. But the ocean is just blank and vast, and there is nothing. And sometimes it just says, we're going to do something weird to you. I don't know. I don't get it. There's some people who love the sea, and I'm one of those, man, you do you enjoy that sea.
I love it
on that wall.
I love it in stories, but then I know I get seasick, and so that's kind of a joy kill right there.
Well,
or buzz kill.
The other thing you were saying, if you follow the road, you know, this way, eventually you're going to get to somewhere. Not only that, you can follow it back and get back to where you are now. When you
You have a
venture out onto
path,
the
yeah.
open sea, you don't know that you can get back to where you are, and you may just be lost forever. There's a
Yeah.
reason. There's a reason that old maps had on the edge, "Here there be monsters."
Yeah.
But there are some people who just have that. One of my favorite lines comes from the end of the first Pirates of the Caribbean movie, where Jack looks out to the open sea and says, "Bring me that horizon." I'm just like,
That's what he likes, yeah.
There are people who are just explorers who need to see what's over the next hill.
Mm-hmm.
The bear went over the mountain to see what he could see. But yeah, so he finally, he goes out to just seeking what's there and comes across this island, or this series of islands with a whirlpool in the middle where the sea was said to drain. It's like, okay, that's a kind of cool. The concept of the everlasting whirlpool. You've seen it show up in Greek mythology with Scylla and Charybdis, and it's just from there, it's just shown up in a lot of different stories, and there is something interesting about it. But I haven't thought of the it in the middle of like an archipelago.
Yeah, I hadn't realized it was in the middle of it when I read it today.
So I was, because I've been wondering if this story is sort of an adaptation of something that different happened. Because I was trying to think of something like, we have something that has stuff going into it, and that's in the spiritual realm, the beyond, that you can see from the cognitive realm, that everything flows towards it. And I'm wondering if this is like someone visited the spiritual realm, and the reason it's an archipelago is because it's it's in the sea of
Beads.
That's what I was looking for. Thank you.
Okay,
that's a very interesting interpretation.
Yeah, but I could see maybe if someone got stuck going, exploring there, how do you even
describe
talk
that?
about this? Yeah, and this would be sort of an interpretation of it.
And I mean, this is separated from the teller by lots of generations, so it could have easily been tweaked into something that people would understand better, even if it still is fantastical.
Well, and it's also, the teller is Hoid, and Hoid will adapt stories however he feels he needs to.
Like it,
yeah, the dog and the dragon.
Mm-hmm.
He has to change it because he's like, all right, you guys don't have anything
fluffy
normal
creatures
on this planet.
It's like
disgusting, scaly.
Everything is crabs.
Yes.
It all somehow always ends up at crabs. Why does it always end up at crabs?
Oh.
You know what this setting kind of reminds me of? It reminds me of like an early Next Generation, late original series Star Trek episode, where it's just like you come across this world and people behave positively but slightly differently, and there's a darker something lurking underneath.
I feel like there was an episode where they go to this planet, and I think this was Next Generation, and
Wesley
Will messes up, and I don't know, and they want to, the natives want to kill Will because he goofs on something small.
Are you talking about Wesley?
Yes, Wesley.
Wesley steps up. Yeah, Will Wheaton. Wesley Crusher.
Will, sorry, yeah, different. Same face, different.
Where he
name.
like steps off of the path, and
or something small like that. That feels comparable to this. How the offense happens with that poor kid.
The little girl. Is it like young woman?
Yeah, it's a young girl. I don't remember it saying an age.
She drops and breaks some dishes. Is it?
She's bringing them food, I think, and then she trips.
And they swarm her.
They swarm her and kill her, and
basically
it's
beat her to death. And it's just one of those things because they're living this idyllic lifestyle, and there's like, everything's peaceful, and then suddenly this just horrific thing happens.
Everything is awesome until it's not.
Yeah. I did wonder if they were trying to allude them to them being a different race or something like that, but I wasn't sure what race it was
Well,
supposed to be.
they were described differently. Yeah, the Uvari.
Strange people with long, limber bodies who wore robes of single color and shells in their hair, unlike any that grow back on Roshar. So I'm not sure what that's alluding to, but I feel like it's alluding to something, but I don't know who that would be because it's not the Udal. What is that race called that has the
Ulida.
four? Yeah,
No,
Ulida.
Ulida is a member of
Ulida.
the race. Shodell?
Shodell, I believe is what it is. It's like the 4 arms because they would say 4 arms
Yeah.
if that's what it was.
Yeah, you think that would stand out?
That would be the distinguishing thing.
Oh, okay.
Just a smidge. But yeah, like it just feels the way Hoid describes it makes me think that it's supposed to be alluding to somebody, but it's also possible it's a race we haven't seen. So
yeah, well, because one of the things is normally, whenever you see someone from another, place on Roshar, they're shorter. So if it's someone from Roshar saying they're long and limber, it's like, okay, well, you guys are normally at least like even the other, like not just the Alethi, everyone is taller relative to
other places.
The others.
Yeah.
That's an interesting thought now that you mention it, because if they did go into the cognitive realm, they could be Spren.
Yeah.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Of course, killing a Spren is a difficult feat. So I don't.
Yeah.
It's an interesting. But yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I'm trying to piece it to things that we've seen, but for all we know, what this is referring to, one, it could just be a myth, and Brandon just puts it there because these worlds do need myths and things that may or may not have happened. But I don't think he would, because I think he'd feel that's sort of a cop out.
And this feels like a big story within a story too.
Exactly. Well, because it's one that's permeated multiple cultures on Roshar. Like this isn't an Alethi story. This is a full-on Rosharan story. So it's one of any story that permeates multiple cultures. You sit there and go,
tends
okay,
to have a kernel of truth to it.
Yeah, there's got to be something to this if it's permeating a lot of things.
Yep.
But yeah, I don't know. It's a weird trying to map this to things that we've seen. I think it'll probably end up be like the lighthouse guy, where we're going to go back later and be like, so that's what that was about.
Yeah.
That's possible.
But it just feels like it stands out just a little bit to me.
It does.
The Uvara. That's what they're
called.
And
that's the thing. Brandon likes to plant seeds that he'll cultivate and then harvest later. But so they swarm the girl and kill her, and the only explanation they give to Darethil's people is the Emperor suffers no was it failure? No.
Yeah, failure, I think.
Failure. And
Amy is checking.
Our Emperor will not suffer failure. So very close.
And and so of course suddenly Darethil's people are a little bit on edge, because this is not the idyllic place they.
Yeah,
and that's kind of one of the things is when you have a place that seems idyllic, or just a utopian society, and there is something darker underneath, it makes it feel all the creepier.
Oh yeah, you're just looking for all the cracks once you see the first one, and it just starts to shatter out. And
it's like having like in a horror movie, having the ghostly monster be a child.
Oh,
and it just,
I always hate that.
It just, there's something particularly creepy because you've taken something that is pure, clean, innocent, and
made it scary.
Made it a terrifying thing, and it's all the more scary because suddenly you don't know what you can trust. It changes the entire worldview. And so apparently this sort of thing continues to go on, and each time the only response is, our Emperor will suffer no failure. And
it's like, it seems like your Emperor needs a little bit of chill.
Yeah. And so they end up going up the tower, and nobody stops them, but they're all like, no, we're not. I'm not pissing off the Emperor. I'm not doing that.
Meanwhile, Kaladin's freaking out because he pictured the tower before Hoid told him about it, and it's just like there's light weaving going on here. Definitely,
It's like, did I see? No, he
This
told me before I saw that. Right, yeah.
This is Yolish light weaving going on, but there's definitely some light weaving.
There's something going on.
Well, 'cause he's doing something with the smoke. It reminds me of what he was doing in the story that he told to
Siri.
Oh,
Shalon?
yeah, Siri in Warbreaker, because he was doing stuff with like sand, I think, in that one.
Yeah, he was using
I feel like
Yolish light weaving then.
I don't know. It's just one of those. It's interesting that I find it closer to that style than the light weaving we know, because it does show, because he doesn't have that light weaving yet.
Right.
Yes.
Well, and even at the start, he's trying to get Kaladin on edge because he does the whole thing of like, I was worried you steal the light out of my pockets. What are you?
He's like, oh no, he knows he's on to me, and it's like, oh, you're just making a joke about the fact that I'm a bridgeman, so we're thieves. Okay. He doesn't know.
And Hoid's laughing because he does know.
He does know. Yes.
Because Hoid loves
Hoid
laughing at other people's expense.
Yeah. Well, and you were talking about with the light weaving, it's strange. Like later on, when Hoid does have Roshar and light weaving, he even makes a remark. He's like, it feels like cheating, because it's too easy. It's not, and it's just like he's playing on easy mode at this point.
Oh man, yeah.
Yeah, but look, he power leveled. He earned it. It's fine.
It's fine.
And now he has what's her name?
No, not Testament. That's the other one.
No, that's Shalon's other one.
Pattern?
Design.
That's
design.
Yeah.
No.
Who is
no, you're right. It's Pattern. Everyone's named Pattern.
They're all Pattern.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so they decide to head into the tower, and everyone else is just like, well, I mean, you can't go into the, but I mean, we can't stop you from, what do we do? What do we do? And they go to the top of the tower and they find the Emperor's corpse. And he's clearly been dead for years at this point. And they bring it down, and and it basically sets their society on fire.
Yep.
Where
it just implodes.
We're rioting, and just because suddenly they realize everything that they've been doing in the name of the Emperor, they cannot blame it on the Emperor. It is their own responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what I find interesting is that because the way they escape first, and
they're like it's imploding as and so they're running to their ship to get there, and
what was her name? Nafti? Was that her name?
That sounds right.
They don't quite figure it out, and they ask her why did this happen. Like, I find it interesting that they couldn't connect the dots. They needed her to spell it out. Like,
well, and
almost like they couldn't.
She's kind of been immersed in it, because she's going through the same thing that everyone else is.
Yeah, Nafti is her name. Yeah.
Interesting. We get a name.
Yeah, Nafti.
Just like, okay, why are we getting a name here?
Well, because she's a character that comes with them, I think, is probably why she gets a name.
I think part of the reason that we're getting a name that Jordan's asking is Brandon likes to follow specific naming conventions with different cultures. I think at one point we're going to find another character with this sort of naming style, and that'll be a link that he's put in there for us.
Could be. So all you Cosmere scholars, find that and let us know, because you guys are so much faster at finding at it.
Sort of like Ryaino, it's like, okay, that's an Elantrian name.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's so, but I find it interesting. I think part of it is almost the idea of like they caused it, but like everything's going so bad so quickly, their minds can't really wrap around why is this happening, and it takes someone who like isn't of them to sort of bring them back to reality.
Well, and it's also, again, why is everybody behaving this way? Well, I'm going through the same mental shift that they all did. And so it's just sort of a firsthand perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Because everybody went crazy, and it's just, and they don't know why. This person is like, okay, my brain just went through this this cognitive dissonance that is
because her starting point for how she built her morality and everything was based on the same thing that all the rest of the island was, versus they started on a very different moral base foundation. So, because when she probably was growing up, the emperor probably was alive, and so they just stuck with it.
Well, and it's interesting that there's like, he will not suffer any failure, or
not suffer failure.
He will not suffer failure. And so you wonder, okay, was he always like this? Or is this like, was this something that got out of control because he wasn't there? Like he like maybe started off on a path that was like, oh, he won't suffer fools. And then it got out of control because there was no feedback on to, go the opposite direction.
You know what this reminds me of? It reminds me of the experiment with the apes in the cage, and there was a ladder, and they had bananas on top of the ladder, and anytime one of the apes tried to go up and grab one of the bananas, they put the experimenters would turn a fire hose on all of the apes, and so after a while, anytime an ape would try and go up and get the bananas, the other apes would pull them down. And gradually they cycled the apes out until it was a completely new set of apes that had never had the fire hose turned on them. But if an ape tried to go up and grab the bananas, they still pulled him down. Because that was the acceptable behavior. That is what had been done. That's how it worked.
They were conditioned.
For some reason, you're not supposed to go up on that ladder and try and get those bananas. And so if one tries to do it, everyone panics, pulls them down, and that's just what they've been conditioned to do. And it kind of feels like that's how this society progressed.
I could very much see it being that the emperor was kind of strict, and then he gets less personally involved and lets an overseer do it, and the overseer just takes it more and more and more and more extreme, and then we're here.
Yeah.
I want to know what style of government this is, where a guy who's at the head of it can die for a couple of years, and everyone's like, oh, no one knew. It's like, no one was cooking for him.
Well, and like that, it could just be a matter of there was sort of like in Warbreaker, nobody sees the
God King,
the God King, and something happens where he dies, and the people who his connection to the other people also die, and it's just people believe, okay, he's reclusive, he has servants doing it, but we never see them.
Yeah, in the Castlevania show on Netflix, there's actually a similar thing that happens with a random king and queen in that one.
That they see that.
Yeah, sorry, I won't spoil any more than that.
Yeah, but I've never gotten around to it. I need to.
It's pretty good. It's very gory.
That's what I've heard.
Let your children watch it, but yeah.
That's not an issue.
Well, I meant for everybody else out there. So, don't let your nieces and nephews watch it. There you go, Jordan.
My nieces and nephews are like in their 20s and 30s.
Okay,
they can decide
Jordan's nieces and nephews, because they seem a little smaller.
What you're hearing is live coverage of us laying out verbal bear traps for Amy to jump into.
Small children, no watch. Okay,
sorry,
there we
Amy.
Go. Yes,
but yeah, it's this, and there are all sorts of comparisons that can be made to this. Like I don't want to wade into this too deep because it's something that we try and avoid, but like there are certain aspects of certain religions where things got out of hand because people took an instruction and took it too far, or built ideas around it. There's all sorts of things that can be built, like within the Cosmere, that sort of thing has happened. I mean, the Vorin religion has aspects of that.
Yeah, women can't even show their hand, their left hand. It's scandalous. We don't know exactly what started that, though, because
no, because that's not even the Vorin religion, as far as we can tell. That seems to go back way beyond that. Seems to.
Yeah, there are aspects of it. There are actually words of Brandon on that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, if you look at the safe hand and stuff,
Okay.
Yeah, Libralita in chat brings it up. I think this is right. It's so that women couldn't wield shard blades, and then
Oh,
it just
man.
sort of grew from there. It started off in somebody just being like, okay, how can we?
Well, that's weird because we know they're women
power to-
radiants, though.
Oh, I know,
They're just trying to be
but the
bad
Vorin
anyway.
religion, it as it is today,
That's
it came after the.
Yeah. Well, and it also makes sense with how they've divided everything up into
gendered everything.
Into masculine and feminine arts because by the same token, it's that's right, because Dalinar has the whole line was we made it so that women, they wouldn't get shard blades, but we couldn't read, and I wonder who got the
Yes.
worst
Who got
of
the
that
better deal.
deal.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, and Scimitar is saying like the Takama belt of Dalinar's master's master.
That's right.
That it's like, why is it so short? Because he was a short guy. That's why there's 3 knots or whatever.
Yep.
No, but when you break like so black and white with everything here and there, it gets really weird really quick.
Mm-hmm.
To the point where they're just like, people won't trust Dalinar because he's learning how to read.
They're like, that's just wrong. It's unnatural. And it's like, oh, everywhere else it's fine. And ardent men read. But
right, but they're they belong to the church,
so it's fine for them to do it.
Literally in their society.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, that's true.
They are the belongings, the property of the church.
Poor Ardent Greg.
Oh, Arden.
I love Ardent Greg.
But hey, no, Arden Greg gets to read though. He gets to read his trashy romance novels.
But his romance novel keeps getting interrupted though.
Yeah.
So
poor guy just wants to read some smut.
Some spice. Anyway, yeah, but do we need to break for the recording, Bill?
Yeah. So we'll break right now. When we come back, we'll sort of do a little bit of a denouement on the after the story fact where Kaladin's chatting with Hoid and all that stuff. So we will be back in a little bit. And we're back. So just a few minutes ago, we finished off with basically the end of the Wandersail story, but we kind of have a little bit of a framework story to go on after that. Because I love Kaladin's immediate response of, that was almost clever, or that might have been clever.
Yeah, Wit asked him and he says that he thought the story was clever.
It was like that was almost cleverness. Because earlier they were talking about what does it mean to be clever? What is cleverness? And because saying confusing things isn't cleverness. And I just like that Kaladin's response as he's listening. He was just like, I think that was cleverness. That was clever. And it's just a nice little pulling it back around to the beginning.
Well, and I like Kaladin's, he's in a bad mood, and he's sort of coming out of it. And we know Hoid's, we don't know exactly how fortune works, but we know that it takes him anyway to where he's needed. And for Hoid, I would think a lot of the times where he's needed is some world-ending thing. But this time now the knock-on effects of this obviously, go further, but for once it's just this calm thing that someone just needs someone to pull them out of their own head.
Yeah, and I mean, we don't know how many other times he was pulling other people out of their own head or helping other people, because I mean, we see the scene with the little girl who gets orphaned and stuff like that, and
end of Oathbringer.
Yeah, and just little things like that. So I mean, I'm sure there's other little moments here and there where Hoid's just not on screen doing it, and he just doesn't always know.
Not to mention Mistborn Secret History.
Yeah.
In a very, very different way.
Yeah.
But the thing that's interesting about that is Shallan has a similar moment with Kaladin doing the same thing during the chasm scene, which we did a deep dive on.
Yeah.
It's one of the things that Lightweavers do, and Hoid wasn't even a proper Rasharan Lightweaver at this point, but it is something that he's always done. It sort of makes sense that he would be a Lightweaver.
Yeah.
No, it's a good little moment, but it's also still characteristically annoying the way Hoid always is.
Absolutely.
The whole
Mhm.
it's like, well, I don't know. What does it mean?
What do
And
you
it's like,
think
oh
it
my-
means? Yeah.
It's like, oh, go shove the Socratic method up your butt.
Yeah, he's playing his jester routine right here, where he is being intentionally annoying and confusing, but still also being very effective.
Hmm.
Of all the stories that he tells Kaladin, this is the one where I think he's being the most honest with not like where I don't know what story I'm trying to tell you because I don't know your situation quite yet.
Yeah.
And you need to pull out the meaning. There's later stories, and Kaladin even calls him on it in Rhythm of War, where he's like, no, shut up, that's not the moral. Like he's just sort of like you clearly have a goal here. Quit pretending.
It's just too
Well,
targeted.
even-
Yeah.
In Words of Radiance, he has Kaladin tell the story
I
when
did
they're-
forget about
when
which
they're
one
in
was that
prison.
one?
When they're in prison, the
Is
story
that
of
the-
Fleet.
That's right, Fleet.
Fleet.
That's what
Yeah.
it was.
Oh, yeah.
Forgot
We'll talk about that one later.
Yeah, we'll do an episode on that one too
Mhm.
at some point.
That was sort of, I mean, pulling back the curtain a little bit when we were doing our planning for the rest of the year. And I'm like, guys, I was looking back and we've never covered any of these stories. All three of us were like, how's that
Ooh.
possible? How did
None?
you do that?
I mean, I'm sure we covered them to some small extent when we were covering
Yeah.
the books, but that's big books, so hard to get it very well covered.
It's just kind of surprising that we hadn't done that yet. It didn't feel possible, but
But we missed all of them, yeah.
but no, the other thing I really like about it is as Kaladin's, he's trying to figure out to himself why do I feel this way? What is it that I'm trying to get out of it? And the whole thing he starts to realize is it's all an excuse. But that's what my subconscious is trying to tell me. That just as they were using the emperor for the excuse for their behavior, I'm calling it cursed. I'm using all these terms. I'm blaming Syl, but really I'm making excuses for myself.
And a lot of therapists work this same way because, these insights, they often typically will not stick unless they come from you. If somebody just tells you this is what's happening, it's so easy to dismiss them. Instead, a lot of times therapists will ask you questions that kind of help you to process your own thoughts and come to these conclusions. So, Hoid is a very unconventional but effective therapist.
Mm-hmm.
He has a lot of experience.
Still don't think I'd want him to be my therapist, unfortunately.
I kind of would, actually.
Well, I don't know. I worry he'd pop out at the wrong time, or anyway. He would dance
Just
circles
show
around me
up.
verbally. So yeah.
I guess it would depend upon the pay rate.
Yeah. I don't think I could afford him. So
But all
do
he
you have
wants
any
from you is
job
a story.
experience?
yeah.
It's going to be a very long resume.
Well, and then, of course, what else does he do? He gives Kaladin the flute, which we still haven't seen the payoff from this aspect of the story. Brandon has hinted that there's some sort of payoff there, because the flute is important and Hoid wants it back.
Do we know? We don't know where it is now, right? We just know it got left in the
No,
bridge camps.
No, we do.
No, they got it. They got it back in
The end of Rhythm of War.
Rhythm of War.
Who got it? That I'm trying to remember.
It was lost in the bridge camps. At one point, Lift had it, didn't she?
Well,
does
so
Lift
Lift is the reason we found it, because she's the one who found all the of the things she stole. She stole a bunch of leftover stuff from that was found at these other camps, because the whole thing was because it leads him to discovering the horse that Tien made for him.
Oh, that's
Which is-
right. I forgot. The wooden
Well, because
horse,
there's the whole thing of, and I mean we're going to probably cover that at some point, but there's the whole thing of whatever it is that Dalinar does in Rhythm of War, where Kaladin gets to talk to Tien again. We get the weirdness of like, but it wasn't real, was it? And then they find that,
but there's
yeah,
the
and
horse.
it's like,
horse.
what did you like? What actually happened here? There's something.
Yeah.
Is because Tien tells him it's like try not to lose it again.
It's like,
And then
what?
A couple days later, he gets it, and
There's
it's just
the
like this.
horse.
It's like what is, and so
It's trippy.
there's stuff going on,
Mm-hmm.
and Hoid does yell
Well,
at him for losing it.
Well, that's
Yep.
the thing. He gives him the flute, and he tells him, "The next time I see you, I want you to be proficient in it.
Mhm.
I want you to have practiced and learned how to play it." And instead, he's just lost it.
In his defense, he had a lot going on that made it hard to go get it. So
It was a busy day.
he had to go save Dalinar and free all the bridgemen.
But other than that, he really had nothing else to do that
Oh,
day.
just a few things, yeah. I did
But
like
he'd
also
already,
that
he'd already
you-
done all of that before he went back to the camps, and so
we find out that Sigzil's master was Hoid too,
Mhm.
which is fun.
That we find out that Sigzil was a
World singer?
world singer,
Yes.
and which are connected to the world bringers on Scadrial, but we don't know
Somehow.
exactly how, other than through Hoid.
And all else fails, blame Hoid.
Hoid. When in doubt, Hoid.
That's a wise life mantra.
No,
When all else fails, blame
well,
Hoid.
the other thing I like about this entire approach of what Hoid's doing here is he just lets him walk away and think about it. And as much as I make fun of Hoid for, oh, it's all right, there's no moral to the story, whatever, you clearly have a plan here. He like you said, he has to work through it himself.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's how all of life, all realizations really,
Mm-hmm.
until you work through it yourself, you don't feel, because humans feel things before we know things. You can confront someone with all the facts in the world, but if we don't feel it first, we don't adapt to it. There's all sorts of studies on this, and it doesn't really matter what that is.
Well, so many times when people are trying to figure out what to do with their life, they'll just shout out, just someone tell me the answer. And someone tells me the answer, and their immediate response is, no, that's not it. And it's just like, no, that was it. You just didn't come to it yourself. You need to internalize it and realize this is it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, the other thing about it that's interesting, because Hoid gets to say a lot of the things that Brandon would like to say, I think. The whole line that he gives about how people forget sometimes that stories aren't they're what you make of them, because Brandon has talked about in other things where people said, oh, I know that this was about this, it's clearly about this, and Brandon, he's never commented on what those things are. He's like, well, it's not about that at all, but he's like, who am I to tell you
that it's not?
That, yeah, it's like, because that's what you got out of it.
Yeah.
And and it's a bit a little bit death of the author type of thing, but it's also like, as you read something, sometimes you get something different out of it because you're just in a different place, and that's what you needed at that moment. And so in some ways, I think Hoid's whole thing about I'm where I need to be, it's almost a meta thing for Brandon himself.
It's like I've heard the saying, it's impossible to read the same book twice, because each time you read it, you're in a different part of your life. You're going to interpret it differently. There are two people involved in telling a story. There's the speaker and the listener. And the story that they create together is different than the story that any other person will get, and the story that a person creates with a storyteller at one point in their life is completely different than the one that will at a different point.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's kind of a secret to why these books connect with so many people is
Mhm.
because everyone can get out of it whatever they need to get out of it. And because Brandon focuses on not so much on telling a moral, but instead iterating what I would call kind of like principles.
Mhm.
Everyone can sort of get something out of it because a lot of people, even on very different sides of issues, agree on specific principles.
Mhm.
And it's just about how they view it. And so you can get something out of it because you're looking at the same thing just from a different perspective.
Well, and for that to work, Brandon focuses very, very specifically on a lot of details, like on accuracy. When he's writing Skyward, he speaks to dogfighter pilots. When he's talking about depression, he references people with firsthand experience. He speaks to them. He's built up this this library of people.
Yeah.
Wouldn't thought of a library of people, but that's a perfect metaphor for it.
Yeah.
That's good. Well, and yeah, because it lends some. But I know some people who talked about that with who suffer from depression with Kaladin, who
Mhm.
talk about how they feel very seen in the
Mhm.
Kaladin scenes. And it's something for me because I don't suffer from depression. And so for me, it gives me a window into that mindset in a way that I'm unable to get otherwise. But to someone who's going through it, it makes them so okay, someone gets it. And I've heard some people talk about that, and they suddenly became worried for Brandon because they were worried that the reason this is so accurate is because this is what Brandon's suffering from. But it's like, no, it's just Brandon really listens to his subject matter experts.
Mhm.
And he probably
And
has sensitivity readers who read it and go, yeah, you got that right, or no, that's not quite right, for things, who have. And it sounds like a lot of good authors do that. They'll have people who are. So have you heard the term sensitivity readers?
Very
yeah,
familiar.
but so I don't think Brandon does specifically sensitivity
Does he
readers
not?
as no, because I think that typically they tend to be a bit more general. Brandon tends to talk about subject matter experts.
Yeah.
And so he gets someone, instead of someone who's a general, he gets someone who's very specific. I remember him.
Am I getting this voice right? Is this what somebody like
Yeah.
this would
Well,
say?
I guess how I've heard of sensitivity readers is not just that, oh, I'm sensitive about subjects, but more like I am part of this community, or I have dealt with this situation. So kind of basically the same thing that you guys have been talking about, but a different term for them, maybe. And I may not be using the right term, but just but that
I just
kind of
know
thing.
that's what Brandon calls them, his subject matter experts.
And that, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it was really cool in the editing panel because you actually see in like the notes people put are color coded. And so if it's his copy editor, it's one color. If it's a subject matter expert, it's a different color. And it lets you see the feedback he's getting from all these different people that make things, and like down to little tiny details. Like it was something for Skyward, and it was like the fighter pilot, and he had like highlighted like they wouldn't use these words. They'd say, this term and this term instead, because those are these are more general. This is the fighter pilot.
The specific,
Right,
yeah.
this is the vernacular.
Yeah, and it was literally just 2 words, a very minor thing, but how many people reading the book are going to be fighter pilots? And thus they'll understand it. But by going to those details, he gets it. And it sounds correct even to a layperson who doesn't know that's the correct term. It adds that authenticity to it. And so in the case of Kaladin, because we know he's brought on health professionals and people who are going through it as well, so that he's getting both sides of the issue. And you read it and you're like, I know someone like this. This isn't Kaladin isn't some character who's going through it. It's like, I know people who just seem like this, where they just get down in the dumps and there's nothing that seems to pull them out. And I don't get it, but I read it here and it's like, it's like, this rings true.
And it's a perspective. It gives you a different perspective on someone you know. So like, even if you're not the person, say we've talked about Kaladin's depression, if you're not the person suffering depression, this is another angle, another touch point to help you kind of triangulate and connect with that person in your life who has depression or whatever. Brandon wrote an essay. I can't remember exactly where it came from. I think it might be somewhere in Arcanum Unbounded, but I can't remember, or one of his acknowledgments or prologues or something, where he talks about how he's often heard the phrase "write what you know," and he kind of pushes back against it. He's like, there's so many things that I'm writing about that I don't have experience, and he talks about working with these people, and so he ends with, I can't do write what you know, I can do write what you see. And that's what he's doing when he consults with these experts and people with firsthand experience, is he's getting a new perspective so that he can see.
Yeah.
And that's why people who read Kaladin feel seen.
I have a friend who really connects with Shallan because she's had, not exactly, I mean, she didn't have the exact experience, but she had similar-ish trauma and levels of trauma and stuff. And so she's like, that's it right there. So she feels kind of validated and stuff by it.
Well, so he even down to things like he talks about Rhythm of War. It's clear he's talking about yesness stuff. Because it's like he can't relate to someone who's asexual in an intimate relationship with someone who's thousands of years old. That's not something like, who do you call up for that? But he reaches out and he finds people and he lets them, hey, is this right? And it's just, Brandon is really good at a skill that so few people are, and that's the skill of assuming other people know something that you don't.
Yep.
And because we're all kind of a little bit arrogant like that, because we take what, we see someone else's thing and we don't think, how would they deal with it? We think, how would I deal with it? And that's not how you make people feel real. That's how you go through, a story really frustrated, because you're just like, just turn around, just simple things. Because like, I would deal with that so much better. That's like, you're not them.
Yeah.
And it's hard to put yourself in the character's shoes, but Brandon's great at it.
Yeah, he's learned how to talk to people and learn from them. He's learned how to learn.
It's a beautiful and rare skill.
All right. Well, thanks to our listeners for being here. We do love hearing from you. So keep on sending in your questions. You can ask us about the Cosmere. You can drop us your ideas for topics you'd like us to discuss during the show. And while you're at it, we'd love to hear your feedback about how you think we're doing, as well as any interesting theories you might have about what's going on in the Cosmere. You can send all your questions and suggestions in a brief, concise email to cosmerestudies@gmail.com, and hopefully we could read or discuss that as part of the show. You can also contact us at the Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies, P.O. Box 970063, Orem, Utah 84097. We do have our own personal projects that we work on outside of the Sandersonian Institute. So, Jordan, why don't you start us off and let us know where we can find your stuff?
You can find me over at youtube.com/splicestream, where I am currently, if you're a fan of Pokemon, I am currently trying to build something I'm calling Amiibomon, where people, we're going to be doing Amiibo battles as if they were Pokemon. If we're building gym leaders, I'm going to be the ice gym leader, armed with my ice climbers, and because I didn't have enough, a Mii fighter that is a pig that I have named Cold Cuts, because I didn't have enough for the typing. So we're just going to roll with it. It's a little dark, but I had to stretch something.
Okay, then.
But yeah, so if you're a fan of Pokemon, we're going to be, actually the day this comes out, I should be streaming it that day. So if you're intrigued, please stop by and we'd love to have you.
Awesome. Amy, how about you?
So my Facebook is Coincidence Cosplay and Props. My Twitter is @CoincidenceCosp because my name is too long. My Instagram is @coincidence_cosplay. My TikTok is @coincidencecosplay, all one giant word. And my website is www.coincidencecosplay.com. Wow, I say those words a lot. Anyway, so May the 4th was last week, and so a lot of my content recently has been Star Wars because I got to do something called the Gauntlet, which is where you like get as many events in as you can because there's like a billion different choices on May the 4th. So I went all the way up to Ogden and then all the way back to Salt Lake. We didn't go down super far south because that's not possible to. But I mean, I did 4 different events and I got to
because of time
hang
and
out.
stuff.
Yeah, I know. We have to like drive places and things. But I got to be a Jawa and Jawa with my other friends.
The
and it was
pictures
fun.
looked like it was absolutely awesome.
So there, if you want to check out my TikTok, I have like a whole bunch of different backlogged ones, and I'm pacing myself and putting out like one a day for a while so that you can get all of the goodness that way.
Nice.
But yeah, so it's just really fun, and I got to hang out with a Mando and some stormtroopers and a Jawa and anyway, just lots of fun Star Wars stuff, and I'm gonna try and fix stuff in my house, which I probably won't be documenting, but otherwise that's what I'm doing with my life right now, is those things. So yes.
Cool. As for myself, I have another podcast my friend Dylan and I do called The Innkeeper's Table. We talk about board games, and we have new episodes on Friday mornings. Our most recent episode that came out a few days ago, we did a game spotlight on a classic worker placement game called Lords of Waterdeep, which takes place in the Dungeons and Dragons universe. Fun episode. And then our next episode coming up, we've got a top 3 coming up. I think it's going to be about games that have left our collections that we no longer own. So that should be that should be a kind of fun topic. Outside of the podcast, I did just buy a smoker, and I'm super excited about that. So I will be smoking a large variety of delicious meats. So I'm excited about that. For those of our listeners who want to support the Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies, but you can't become patrons, we would love it if you just let your friends know about the show. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, to like and subscribe over on youtube.com/Cosmere Studies. And if you want to toss us a good review wherever it is you listen to us, we'd appreciate that as well. You can also head over to store.streamelements.com/Cosmere Studies to buy Cosmere Studies merch. All right, guys, final thoughts?
Hoid's a good storyteller.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to covering more of these because, frankly, out of all the stories, I think this is my least favorite. Just it doesn't have quite the emotional impact of some of the others. But if this is like the bottom, like it's more a reference to how good the quality is.
Yeah. So I love Hoid's storytelling voice in these smaller bursts. Like, it got a little bit much for me in Tress, but don't get me wrong, I loved Tress. I loved the story of Tress. Hoid's voice did get to be a little bit much for me at that point, but I love his voice in these short bursts.
There is some sort of really good tongue twister involving the phrase Hoid's voice. I don't know what it is, but there's something there.
I don't know.
Hoid's voice and annoying noise is hoity-toity and affects your poise. I don't know.
As he tells stories to boys.
Poor little boys and girls.
Playing with toys.
Anyway, wow. That was fun. But no, I love Hoid's stories. And this was the very first time that we really got, I mean, like we had Hoid in Warbreaker telling a historical story, but this is the first time where we've got a wit story with a very specific meaning that he's trying to draw a response from someone with. Yeah. So I'm really excited about more of these. And Brandon has talked about, doing picture books with Hoid stories and stuff like that. I'm all about that. All right. Well, in addition to the live episodes of the show that stream on twitch.tv/Innkeeper's Table every 2 weeks on Monday nights at 7:30 p.m. Pacific Time, 10:30 p.m. Eastern, listeners can find our videos on YouTube or audio versions of the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and just about any other service that carries podcasts by searching for Cosmere Studies. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook under the profile @Cosmere Studies. For our next episode, we're going to try focusing in on one of the climactic scenes from The Lost Metal. If you've read the book, you probably know which one I'm talking about. It involves Wayne. If you haven't yet, I won't spoil it here. So join us for the live discussion in 2 weeks on Monday, May 22nd, 2023 at 7:30 p.m. Pacific Time, 10:30 p.m. Eastern at www.twitch.tv/Innkeeper's Table. Until then, on behalf of Amy, Jordan, and myself, thanks for listening, and remember,
There's always another secret.